Hey, welcome. Today, we're diving into a quiet but massive revolution happening in medicine. It's all about a shift from the super-controlled, perfect world of a lab to the messy, complicated reality of our actual lives. We're going to see how the story of a treatment doesn't just stop at its approval. In fact, that's often where the most important part really begins.
So let's kick things off with a big question. Just think about this for a second. A new drug gets approved after years and years of super rigorous testing. But what happens then? What if the most critical information, the most powerful insights, only show up once that product is out in the wild, being used by millions of different people? Well, that one question is changing absolutely everything.
And that tees up our first section perfectly, beyond the clinical trial. Because, you see, the story of a medical treatment doesn't just end when a regulator gives it the green light. Nope, that's actually where a whole new chapter of discovery gets started.
Okay, so for decades, the gold standard for testing anything new has been the randomized controlled trial, or an RCT. The best way to think about this is like taking a brand new car for a test drive, but on a perfectly smooth, closed-off racetrack. The conditions? Ideal. The drivers? Experts. Everything is meticulously controlled to see if the car, or in our case the drug, actually works the way it's supposed to. And it's absolutely crucial for proving that something is safe and effective to begin with.
But here's the catch. Real life isn't a closed track, is it? It's more like a chaotic city street during rush hour. Real patients, us, we're incredibly diverse. We've all got different genes, different diets, other health problems, and let's be honest, we don't always take our medicine exactly when we're supposed to. All of this creates a pretty big gap between how a drug works in a perfect trial versus how it works out in the real world.
So, how in the world do we bridge that gap? Well, that question leads us straight into our second section, into the hero of our story today, real-world evidence. This is the key that's unlocking that entire next chapter of medical discovery.
So what is this stuff exactly? To put it simply, real-world evidence, you'll hear it called RWE, is the clinical evidence we get by analyzing health data that's gathered outside of those traditional, controlled trials. It's all about figuring out how a medical product truly performs in the day-to-day chaos of actual healthcare. And you're probably thinking, okay, so where does all this data come from? Well, it's pretty much all around us. It's in anonymized data from our electronic health records. It's in insurance claims that show which treatments people are getting. It comes from patient registries for specific diseases. And believe it or not, it's even coming from wearables like our smartwatches. It's a total treasure trove of insight into everyday health.
Now, what I love about this slide is how clearly it lays out the difference. I mean, look at this. RCTs, they happen in a controlled, almost sterile setting with a really specific, narrow group of patients, and the data is collected only for that research. RWE, on the other hand, comes from everyday medical care with a huge, diverse population, and the data is just a byproduct of routine doctor visits. They aren't fighting each other. They're two sides of the same coin, two essential pieces of the same puzzle.
All right, so now that we get what RWE is, let's get into why it's such a game changer. That's Section 3, RW's impact. This is where we go beyond the definition and really see how it's giving us the full panoramic picture of how a treatment truly works. RWE really has three superpowers. First off, because it pulls from this enormous pool of real patients, it actually reflects the true diversity of the population, all ages, ethnicities, and health statuses. Second, it lets us look at long-term outcomes, way beyond the few months for years of a typical clinical trial. And third, and this is huge, it helps regulators and doctors make faster, smarter decisions based on what's happening right now. And if you want a perfect example of this in action, just think back to the COVID-19 pandemic. We all lived it. RWE was absolutely critical. It was instrumental in quickly spotting very rare side effects, like the risk of myocarditis in young men after vaccination. That knowledge allowed health officials to quickly update their guidance. That's a kind of speed and scale that traditional trials just can't deliver.
So the big takeaway here is that agencies now use RWE for continuous, ongoing surveillance. It's like having a permanent neighborhood watch for medicine. They can spot new safety signals that never showed up in trials, constantly reevaluate if a drug's benefits still outweigh its risks for certain people, and rapidly update product labels with the latest real-world findings. Now, this isn't just happening in one or two countries. As we're going to see in Section 4, this is a massive global shift. Regulators all over the planet are creating new frameworks to officially embrace the power of real-world evidence.
So, let's start in the United States. The FDA is a huge champion of this. The 21st Century Cures Act, a major piece of legislation, specifically encouraged using RWE.
not just for safety, but also to help approve new uses for drugs that are already on the market. That can really speed up innovation.
Hop across the Atlantic and you'll see the European Medicines Agency is also a leader here. They use something called adaptive pathways, which is just a fancy way of saying they have a flexible process that lets them look at new evidence as it comes in, even long after a drug is approved. And they've built these incredible data-sharing networks, like Darwin EU, to pool knowledge from all across the continent.
And this momentum is just as strong in Asia. You've got regulatory bodies in Japan and China actively building out their own RWE frameworks. The big goal for everyone is to get on the same page, to align with global standards so that medical decisions everywhere are based on the best possible evidence.
Of course, a transformation this big doesn't happen without a few bumps in the road. So in our final section, let's take an honest look at the challenges and then peek at the really exciting future ahead for real-world evidence.
So what are these hurdles? Well, there are a few big ones. First, data quality. Data from one hospital system needs to be able to talk to data from another. One doctor might type shortness of breath, while another types the medical term dyspnea. Making all that data consistent is a huge job. Second, and this one is completely non-negotiable, is protecting patient privacy. And finally, just wrangling these massive, messy data sets takes some serious analytical brainpower. These are real challenges that have to be managed with incredible care.
But the reason everyone is pushing so hard to get past those hurdles is because the payoff is enormous. And this slide right here, it nails the why this all matters. For patients, it means safer treatments and faster updates. For doctors, it's real-time insights into what's actually working. For regulators, it means smarter, faster decisions. And for the industry, it's a way to prove a product's real value. It is truly a win for the entire healthcare ecosystem.
Looking ahead, the future of RWE is just incredibly exciting. It's going to be supercharged by technologies like AI and advanced analytics, which can spot subtle patterns in these massive data sets that a human could never hope to find. And just as important, it's going to be fueled by more and more global collaboration. And that really leaves us with one final thought to chew on. We live in this hyper-connected world where we're generating data every single second of every day. So the real question for all of us is, as this real-time evidence becomes more and more powerful, how will it ultimately redefine not just the future of medicine, but the future of our own health?